you have to understand that your system may not be the status quo for all of residential remodeling, new construction. So your customers are investing in you, and you owe it to them, to your subcontractors, to your vendors that put all of this work in, and to yourself to follow this job to the finish line. And that's not to say that you shouldn't walk away when you should walk away. And these customers invested a lot of money and a lot of time in you, and you owe it to everyone to figure out how to make this job happen. Good morning, good afternoon, whatever it may be for you. I don't know what day of the week it is, what time it is. I've lost track of time. I'm sitting down recording this on a Saturday afternoon while my oldest Selby is at a birthday party at a bowling alley. Throwback to some 90s birthday parties that we indulged in and enjoyed back in the day. I don't think many kids have bowling birthday parties nowadays, but we had one for Selby when she was 3, probably what we wanted. And she is at one now at a bowling alley that I had parties at when I was little. So that's cool. Blast from the past. Rachel is out bringing her there. Tilly's in the other room on her iPad. I had a few minutes, so I decided to hop on and record this podcast. So thank you to them for staying busy and giving me a little bit of idle time to hop on here. Hopefully you guys are having a good week. Had a good week. This week's going all right for you. I know it's Wednesday, hump day, working towards that weekend. I have my coffee today. It is brought to you from Starbucks. My wife picked that up for me. It's just black coffee. I don't put anything in it, but it's good. I like Starbucks coffee. They should sponsor this podcast. The more I think about it, they can get in, strike while the iron's hot. We haven't blown up yet. I think it's a good opportunity for them to hop on board, get me some discounted coffee. It'll make me happy, my wife happy. Maybe offer some deals for the listeners. I feel like it's a good opportunity. So if anyone knows anyone at Starbucks, put me in touch. They can sponsor this podcast, Midweek Modern Craftsman Podcast. All kidding aside, hopefully you guys are having a good week, staying busy. I know it's cold here right now. We got a little cold spell coming in, but you guys are hanging in there. I did hear from my buddy Chris Murray. If you guys aren't following him, cabinet builder up in Canada, America's Hat, give him a follow. He builds a lot of really nice stuff. We're actually going to have him as a guest on the standard Modern Craftsman podcast, but he sent me, let's see, it's called the Technivorm Mocha Master. I know I want to say it's Mocha. I don't know how you pronounce it. Grinder and a 15-cup carafe made in Holland drip coffee that looks pretty legit. He said that they are coffee addicts, as am I, and they really like this setup. So I'm going to check it out. Maybe treat myself. We'll see. But thanks for the heads up, Chris. So this week, I'm going to follow up on last week's podcast blog. I know that the website is close to completion right now, so I'll be able to get the blogs that I've been writing that will accompany these audio versions. It's going to be different. They'll probably have more information, a little bit different information, but so if you want to revisit them or use them to supplement the audio podcast version, it's not just going to be a transcript of this podcast. It's actually a written blog post. So it'll be something for you to refer back to, and hopefully, you work as a supplement to this and help kind of further your knowledge and get a more overall comprehensive understanding of what I'm looking to articulate through these. So last week I dug into kind of what my what the impetus for my pre-construction process was, why I developed those systems and what my intent was with them, and then started explaining what my vetting process looks like to try and find a customer that's the best fit for me, that's the best fit for my company, selfishly, so that I can do the work that I want and make as much money as possible. Being a smaller outfit, I understand I'm limited as to how much work I can produce, the volume of work that I can produce in a year. So, in order for me to make money, I need to be as profitable as possible. So, that comes down to efficiencies, reducing my overhead, and working for customers who are willing to pay a premium for my work. So, I have a very specific customer, and a lot of the difficulties of my job, which I found out just through trial and error, is me finding a customer who's a good fit for me and a reduction in the amount of time that I'm spending in finding that customer and vetting that customer. So I'm going to dig into my actual pre-construction process. It's not going to be spreadsheets or numbers. If you guys want to talk about that, I can hop on here and schedule another podcast to dig into that stuff more. This is more so my system and order of operations. And obviously, it's not set in stone. I think that with our jobs and what we do and working in people's home and being in touch with so many different customers and personality types and projects, that you have to be fairly fluid with this. So you may have to adjust. You don't, it's not the type of thing where you can just dig your heels in and say, nope, this is it. This is my process. If you don't like it, take it or leave it. We're going to move on. So I think that take all of this, adapt it as you see fit. If there's things that work for you, great. If there's things that don't work, it's just my experience and kind of what I do with my process and my customers and my potential leads. And hopefully it serves as being useful to you in your business operation life. The goal for me is to move away from this price-driven commoditization of our industry and start implementing some systems and tactics that I feel are generally reserved for a larger scale construction company. So as I'm recording this, I see my photo coming up, and I forgot to mention that I got my hair cut by one of Rachel's friends that she grew up with in Cranford, works at Head House Salon in Philadelphia. I go to a salon now because I really hate getting my hair cut. This is very off topic, but I got a new haircut and I did my hair today because the girls told me that it was a dad cut and I looked a mess. So I'm pretty happy with it though. It's a lot shorter than it's been. I feel better. So if you guys have noticed the new haircut, that's what's up. Fresh haircut, look good, feel good. I actually hate getting my haircut. It's very uncomfortable for me. I don't like they shampoo your hair, and I don't know why, but I'm paying somebody to do that, and I feel as though it's something that they shouldn't be doing, or that I'm taking advantage of somebody, or almost that they're below me because I'm making them do mundane tasks that I could do myself. And then I don't like the dialogue with the barbers or the people who work at the salons where you don't know them and you walk in, they're like, so you're a painter, or what are you doing this weekend? Any cool plans? You partying, going down the shore? And I'm not one for small talk. It makes me very uncomfortable. But shout out to Morgan. She makes me feel very comfortable. There's no BS. If I don't feel like talking, she doesn't make me talk. I go in, I get my hair cut, and I get out of there, and it's quite enjoyable for me. And she does a nice job, and my wife sends her inspiration photos, so it's nice and easy. So for the first time in my life at 37 years old, I don't feel incredibly uneasy and anxious getting my hair cut. Still a little bit of that there, but I'm working past that at this point in my life. Back to our regularly scheduled programming, because you guys didn't sign up here to hear how I'm getting my haircut, but I know that you all probably saw my haircut and were like, damn, that looks good. I wonder where he's getting his haircut. So now you guys know. I was talking about earlier that a lot of this process is reserved generally for larger scale construction companies who have a team on board who can kind of handle all this process. And I wanted to be able to do that for myself with the pre-construction process. And the only way I found that I could do it was by vetting customers and really spending this amount of time on the customers who are willing to hire me. So I don't have a team in place to be doing pre-con for 5-6 projects at a time, or 5-6 projects during the year. It's going to be 3 or 4 projects a year. And I want to be able to take the necessary time to do an adequate job of pre-construction and working with my customers who have invested in me to tailor that design and tailor that budget and scope of work to what fits their schedule and their program. So that's where all of this came from. It's my pre-construction process. Again, all aspects of this may not work for you, but if there's something that you can pull out of this that helps you, that's amazing, and that is great. This process for me is only reserved for customers. My pre-construction process is not reserved for people who are coming to me who I don't have a pre-con agreement or contract in place. This is reserved for customers. This is somebody who's paid me, who's signed a contract, who understands the constraints and my process and how that works. So I just want to remind you guys here, that's something that I've developed over the years. That's something that took a lot of experience, a lot of confidence to be able to sell, and it's not easy. So I think that if you can start integrating certain aspects of this into your pre-construction process, or how you approach a job, or how you communicate and interact with your customers, that bit by bit you'll be able to tailor this to suit your needs and your customers' needs. And I think that you'll be on your way to where you need to be. I'm always adapting this. It's job by job, but the goal is to, throughout this process, continually bring value to my customers, because they've chosen to work with me and they've invested in me, and I owe it to them to spend the necessary time doing this. Again, you can't dig your heels in right off the bat. You have to understand what you can give and take with your customers, but start small. Build your confidence, build your esteem, build your systems, and I think that it'll all kind of fall into place. So right now, let's assume that we have a vetted lead, which we spoke about last week, who kind of checks all of those boxes for us and for your firm. You've established a loose budget for them. Your customer understands the timeline that they're under, and they're willing to engage in this pre-construction agreement with you, which, a reminder, will require a financial investment. There's a deposit there. So how you sort out the terms of agreement on this is going to be up to you. What I do is, based on the scope of the project, I make a determination based on experience of how much time I think I'm going to have to invest in the pre-con of this project, who's going to be involved with that, if it includes design, how many subs, how long I'm going to take developing this budget, refining this budget, sorting out what I need to with my subs, site visits with vendors, all of that. I'm going to guess how much time that's going to take. When you integrate design into this, it's a little bit different. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to speak with a designer. If we're not handling design, I'm going to budget the amount of time, how much that lump sum is going to cost, and then if we go over the budgeted time in pre-construction, it's going to be on an hourly basis. Again, this is the type of thing where maybe up front you just give them a lump sum and say, this is our pre-con. It's skin in the game. They're signing up an agreement. They're investing in you, and maybe it doesn't cover all your time. Maybe it does cover all your time, but you now have your customer who's signed in, who's invested in you, and that is very important in this process, because now you're getting paid for your time, and they understand how serious this is. Your subs understand how serious this is. Your designer understands how serious this is. It's not a pricing exercise at this point. So again, I budget what I think it's going to take as far as time goes and how much of my effort. A lot of times if I go over, I'm not charging that hourly fee. I have that in place because I've had customers before where it's a standard remodel, and the people just really want to get deep in the weeds, and they spend a lot of my time, they eat up a lot of my time, and they don't make decisions, and I've gotten burnt badly. So now I have that on the back burner. I have that hourly rate where I say, hey, we're coming up on our budget allowance as far as time for pre-con goes, or as far as time for design goes. We're on our third iteration of this. We have to start making decisions moving forward. If not, it's going to be X amount per hour. And I think a lot of times that serves as a little kick in the ass for them to start making decisions. If it's all lump sum and you're into this design for however long it takes, they don't have that much incentive to wrap things up and be extremely efficient with their time. So make sure that you have something in there to cover your ass. I got burned a couple times. The important thing for me up front was just locking in customers, so I knew that I wasn't necessarily wasting my time. So we have a vetted lead in place. The customer understands the constraints, how we operate, what our business is about, that we're not looking to competitively bid jobs, and we have a deposit check from them that's going to cover my time to build up this budget and to build up this design. The first thing that I need is a design. I cannot price something that's a verbal scope. I cannot price something that's just a floor plan. I can't price something that the customer had a cousin who's out of state that came at Thanksgiving and measured their downstairs and sent me proposed floor plan for that. I want an actual design in place. If it's a simple enough project, if it's a cabinet project, kitchen renovation, bathroom renovation, I want to or feel as though I can handle the design, I will do that. And again, I will budget X amount of hours at this rate per hour. We'll track the time that it takes. If we go over, I have to make a judgment call whether I want to start implementing that hourly design fee, or if I think we're going to wrap things up pretty soon, I'm not going to hammer them with that. So that's a judgment call on your behalf. So sometimes on a larger project, I will bring in design as far as an architect, an engineer, interior designer, and you have to make a decision whether you want to hold that under that contract under your umbrella, or you want the customer to hire them on their own. It depends on how much involvement you want, what the capacity of design is, and how in depth they're going to be, and how these designers work. What I like to do is I prefer is to hold that end of the contract. So if they're going to a designer, I'm going to say, or an architect, say it's it's an addition. I'm going to go and say, hey, this is my customer's program. This is what they want done. How much time do you think? What is the budget for your design to do this? I'm going to pay the architect. I own that aspect of the contract. I'm exposed there, so I have a markup on that to cover my involvement. But then I'm not just sending them to an architect where I have to check in with them, or maybe they go another route. For me, I want to be involved. I want to guarantee the work is mine. So I'm oftentimes going to handle the design aspect, whether I'm doing it myself or running the designer through me. But again, you have to have a markup on that because there's liability there, there's exposure there, and it's going to be time on your end. So you want to make sure that you're covered. I like to think of it when I go down this path and this route is that I'm subcontracting design. It wouldn't be any different than hiring a plumber where you have to understand the scope of the work. You're dealing with the plumber. The customer is then dealing through you and the plumber to a certain extent. So I just want to handle that. I want control over this whole project. That's how my process is. Certain jobs, I do budge on that, but for the most part, unless it's a return customer, a lot of times with return customers, I'll say, hey, we've done this before. I want you to go to this architect, this designer, and sort out what you want and then circle back to me. But a lot of times the first time I want to establish that control. I want to establish my processes, and I want to handle that aspect of it. So I speak with the designer. I figure out what they need from me, what they think it's going to take as far as timeline. The designer bills me. I bill the customer. Once you have this design in place, whoever's developing that design, it's time to refine your budgeting. So you created this ballpark of these napkin numbers. You think the cost of the job is going to be X amount. You now have a design in place rather than a verbal scope or a preliminary conceptual design, and you need to start establishing the budgeting. I have a spreadsheet that I have gotten templates for spreadsheets from friends who work for other companies who have their own companies, and then my own spreadsheet that I've integrated all of them. It's this blend of everything that works for me, and what doesn't work for me gets tossed out. So I take this spreadsheet and I start infilling the data. And the reason I like to do a line item budget is because I can't miss anything. Everything that I could have on a project and everything that I may or may not, it's all in there. So as I go through, I can remember fasteners, I can remember porta potty, I can remember cleanup, floor protection. Everything's in there so that my budget is comprehensive and I'm not missing anything. It also helps at this point for me to develop a verbal, or it's not verbal, sorry, to write down a scope of work, to type up a scope of work. So I take this design and I create a narrative on paper of what this job's going to look like. And that serves two purposes. One, it really wraps my head around this project. I understand the entirety of the scope. I build this job. What's the first step? What's the second step? Third. So when I go through and I start pricing things, I'm not forgetting certain aspects of this job. If I just look at a plan, there's things I'm going to miss. If I create this narrative on the computer of what this project looks like, there's less of a chance that I'm going to miss something because I'm walking through this job and I'm writing everything out. And as something else comes to my head, I add it or I place it within this narrative as to where it's going to be based on a timeline. This helps you develop schedule, and it's also useful for sending to your subcontractors when I have a written scope of work for my plumber to send him. This is everything that needs to be done, and this is when it falls into the schedule or when I need it done by. So I take that written scope of work and I take the plans and I infill this spreadsheet to create a comprehensive budget. I plug in numbers for where I think my subs are going to be, and then the next step is to get them to the job. So my subs have not gotten to the job at this point. They haven't met my customers. They haven't put eyes on the work other than photos and me articulating to them verbally what this job looks like, what I think, what other jobs it may have been similar to ensure that our numbers are somewhat accurate. And then if it's an older job or there's something that I think we may get hung up on, I'll ask them to pad that number a little bit. But I meet them on a job. We go over the scope of work. They have the plans at this point. I ask them for certain aspects of their project that may hang us up, that may affect somebody else's part or somebody else's scope. If my plumber feels as though he's only going to be able to run a sink drain by pulling up the subfloor, I need to know that. I need to know how much subfloor I'm replacing, if we are going to have to patch an existing floor, if we're going to have to open up the basement. So there's a lot of stuff like that that I may look at the job and not consider. And I depend on my subs heavily to help me out on that aspect of the job so that we're covered, that they're getting paid, and that at the end of the day, everyone is as profitable as possible and we're not running into issues as the job starts where they say, hey, I didn't really consider this. That's why they're there, and they understand that. They're also meeting the customers at this point. So this is the first time that they're walking in the door. It's important to be professional, to look professional, to take your shoes off, have booties there, have a solid conversation with them. This is that first impression that we talked about before that's extremely important because these customers aren't only hiring you, they're hiring your entire team. And if they don't like a certain sub's attitude or the aura that they put off, it can be bad news for you. And I like to start the job off on the right foot. I like to have my subs ask my customers if there's any concerns, anything they're worried about, if they have questions for them, and just make them feel very comfortable. I do want to reiterate that I have not gotten my subs to the job at this point. I try as much as possible to not kick tires for my subs, to not waste their time. I don't want to be every other contractor that has them price every job, that has them come look at jobs. I want them to look at a job when I have secured the job, and then they're willing to spend the necessary time and do the due diligence that's required to get an accurate price. They're coming once. If they have more questions, they're willing to come again. They've met the customers, but I really want to protect my subs. A lot of my subs has been with me for 10 years. They're critical to the health and wellness of my business. I'm going to protect them at all costs. I will not throw them under the bus for a customer, because at the end of the day, they've been with me before this project. They're going to be with me during this project. And if things go well, they're going to be with me after this project. I'm oftentimes with this customer for a singular experience until they decide to hire me back based on being happy with our product and happy with our experience. So for me, it's a risk. People sometimes are hard to please. I don't know how every job's going to be, but that's a singular experience that I'm looking to work around with this customer, to manage, to handle. With my subs, it's not a singular experience. There's many, many experiences and many jobs, and those relationships are very important to me. Not that customer relationships are not, but again, worst case, that's a singular experience and they won't be with you after. Your subs will be. So protect your subs and treat them right. After this, I can solidify a budget. I can get a hold of vendors, get all of our numbers in. If we need to make selections as far as countertops, tile, it depends on how in depth they want to go with budget, what the project, the scope of the project is. If we have time, once the ball gets rolling and work commences, that we can start making decisions. A lot of times on our smaller jobs, I want to make all those decisions beforehand. So I'm going to add all of that to the budget. And once I finalize this budget, I hand that over to my customers and they own that. They own the design and they own the budget. Something to note there is that I don't have a work contract in place at this point. I don't own this job. It's not my job. I own the pre-construction contract, and I got paid for that at this point. But now I'm handing over this design and I'm handing over this comprehensive budget to them. They could go and price this job out with whoever they want at this point. If you have done a good job being fair, being efficient, treating them well, being professional in the way that you've ran this pre-construction process, and you've upheld your end of the bargain with integrity, and you've brought a lot of value to this relationship, there's absolutely no reason why they should be looking elsewhere at this point for somebody to bid this job out, unless they didn't like your experience, they didn't like your process, they don't trust or have faith that you're going to be able to execute this based on budget, timeline, quality, whatever that may be. So if they don't choose to go with you at that point, I would look within as to why they didn't, because it's more than likely something within your process, not the customer. Knock on wood, I have not had a customer walk away from pre-construction and not hire us. We've generally figured out where we need to be in order to make this project happen, but that's where I bring value to this relationship. As soon as you are not adding value to this relationship, they will look elsewhere. I think that if you do a good job and you're fair and you work hard throughout this process, this pre-con, and not just take it for granted that they're going to hire you to do the work, even if it comes in over budget. If your pre-construction budget does not align with what they wanted to spend, or the design ends up being more money, that you have a few options here. Your customers can wait until they have the money, put this off until they save and do it all at once. They can modify scope, and you have to be careful there, because I want to be delivering a project and an experience and a product that they're very happy with. So I don't want to pull certain items from the scope that are going to affect that. If I feel as though I'm pulling something that really affects the overall quality and longevity or design of this project, I will walk away from that, because I think that they might be better off going a different route at that point. I want to offer suggestions that can get them what they wanted, or very close to that, within their budget and within their timeline. So you can value engineer this project, you can concede certain things, but again, to reiterate, it's bringing value to this relationship. If you can spend time finding out alternative material selections, or an alternative scope, or somewhere to reduce the amount of work in the level of finish that's not going to affect the integrity of the job, they're going to have more faith in you, have more trust in you. And that just brings so much value to this relationship that, again, they're going to hire you for this work contract. You have to understand that your system may not be the status quo for all of residential remodeling, new construction. So your customers are investing in you, and you owe it to them, to your subcontractors, to your vendors that put all of this work in, and to yourself, to follow this job to the finish line. And that's not to say that you shouldn't walk away when you should walk away, but you have to understand these customers invested a lot of money and a lot of time in you, and you owe it to everyone to figure out how to make this job happen. That overall, in a nutshell, is my pre-construction process. If anyone wants to know about spreadsheets, specifics of what that looks like, let me know. I can get you answers. I can do a podcast on that. I in my head, I'm having trouble delineating how to stay out of the weeds on that one. Or just making it interesting in general, because I don't find Excel that interesting. No offense to anyone who does. It's just not me. So I didn't want to sit on here for 45 minutes and talk about that. But that's how I deal with my customers. That's how I deal with leads that come in. That's how I vet my customers. That's some insight into my process. Again, if there's stuff that you can take from that and add value to what you're doing, to your systems, to your team, by all means do it. If you have questions, reach out to me. Every situation, every build, every renovation, every customer is different. So you have to be able to adapt. You have to be fairly fluid. You have to be able to audible. You can't just dig your heels in and say, this is my process, and this is my process. But there's things that I tweak on every job, and I tailor them for each customer, for each budget, for each timeline. Because if a customer has invested in us and I've gone this far with them, there's somebody I want to work for. There's somebody who, I get along with them. They are hiring me and putting a lot of faith in me. There's trust there. We've established that. So I want to be doing the work. I want to be doing the pre-con. I want to knock this job out of the park for them. But I may have to change my systems a little bit to do that. The systems that you cannot change are the ones that define you as a business and create those ethos of your business. And I think that once you start doing that, you get into trouble, because now you're not performing as TRG Home Concepts. You're bringing systems in place that aren't within your scope of work, or aren't what you're known for, or aren't your strong suits. And now you're putting out a different product. So it's the same thing as protecting your subs. I need to protect myself. I've been in business for 14 years, and I'm not going to put my reputation on the line for one customer because they want one thing that I'm not willing to do. So when it comes to that stuff, sure, dig your heels in, get some nice boots on with some thick heels, dig those suckers into the ground nice and deep, and say, this is the way we do it. Explain why. Be kind. and explain to them why you've implemented these systems and that may be a non-negotiable. There's other things that you may be able to negotiate, but again, you gotta play this all by ear. And that's a good, actually, is it play it by ear or play it by year? I say play it by year, but I'm not sure what it is. I don't know if we'll ever get to the bottom of that, but hopefully this podcast has helped you guys out. I'll have more coming up. They've been fun. This has been a nice Saturday afternoon. I've got some quiet time in my dark studio. Again, hopefully you guys are having a good week. You've had some good coffee. I got to look into that coffee maker and grinder that Chris sent me. Any more suggestions for coffee makers, grinders, types of coffee sponsors, all things coffee? You can find it here on the midweek version of the Modern Craftsman podcast. As always, I appreciate all of our partners, all of our sponsors on this podcast, everyone who has promoted this, who has supported this, Slash and his team for the entire rebrand, which has been incredible. Doug, for all the hard work he puts in. Nick, for his friendship and support over the past 10 years. There's not many friends and people like him. I do a lot of what I do on a daily basis and have the balls to do it because I know at the end of the day, Nick's got my back. Catherine, Ariana, everyone who's handling the social end of things and keeping us operating as, I wouldn't quite say a finely tuned machine, but we're getting there. We're more towards a machine than Nick and myself flailing. So Doug, Ariana, Catherine, thank you guys so much. All of our listeners, you guys have been amazing. Everyone who has given me motivation to continue to get on here on a weekly basis and write every week. I wouldn't be doing if it weren't for your support and the love that you guys are sending my way. So as always, if you have 2 seconds, hop on, give us a review. We don't ask for much from you guys, but that really does help us. It brings a lot of value to our partners and our sponsors and the people who are supporting this podcast. So check out their products, what they offer, endorse them, use their products, and leave us a review and spread the word. Please tell everyone. Hop on your kid's school bus in the morning. Like when Selby and Tilly get picked up, I run onto the bus and I yell at all the kids, hey, you're not old enough yet, but when you are, and when you start getting phones, listen to the Modern Craftsman podcast. I yell at the bus driver. I tell you, you got to tell every kid who comes on here, you got to listen to the Modern Craftsman podcast. And pretty soon, all will be right with the world, and we'll be all set. We'll just be able to sail off into the sunset. All right, guys. Hope you have a good week. Hope you're having a good week. I will catch you on the next one.